Welcome to Takeaways, Life Lessons Learned. My guest today is Tiger Todd. Tiger is the founder of Hero School. So typically I would continue reading your bio, but something is telling me I should let you tell us what is Hero School in your own words.
So, like in a movie where the character has to undergo this transformation in order to accomplish the impossible. And at the end of that, it's like 2 hours later for us as the audience. So Hero School is an educational technology class that helps people accomplish the impossible in 2-hour sessions. So, and Hero School is, of course, the intellectual property behind it. In a live session, it might be 16 dimensions to reach a human being and help them overcome whatever the hurdles or obstacles, just like a movie character.
And so I know initially you started with applying Hero School material to homeless people to get them to transform, change.
Yeah. So, in the movies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have themes, but we have a structure to it. And I had come up with Hero School prior to that. I had a series of electronic stores. That's 1984. And I kept watching the same section of a movie over and over again. So you start getting that programmed in, kind of like, you play sports.
Okay.
You don't have to study basketball, but if you play it enough, you kind of know the game. So I kept seeing these same recurring themes. And so I'd found a math formula for movie characters. And, but I thought about it when I saw that first batch of 1,854 homeless people in a park. And I thought, wow, well, what if we applied the same metric to the audience, a reverse engineering the number to work for the audience. So it's now we know it as a human change formula, a universal human change formula. But I derived it from movies and from mythology, from mythological stories, historical stories.
So Hero School, it's a nonprofit.
No, Hero School nonprofit licenses the intellectual property, this little learning engine. The learning engine is the little special part, but there is a nonprofit in town that licenses and delivers that. And I founded that 29 years ago.
So 29 years ago, you founded a nonprofit that
delivers.
The core focus, though, is to deliver it to homeless people.
Yeah, it's the prevention and the rapid reversal of homelessness.
The prevention and the rapid reversal.
Because 2 hours
of homelessness.
At a large group. Yeah.
All right. So Hero School, the nonprofit, Hero School, the learning methodology. That's what you're doing now. Your bio says you founded 3 companies. I believe you mentioned the career before. Hero School is in electronics.
Yeah, I was right in college in Walla Walla, Washington at Whitman. And, I don't know that you want this much story, but I was actually singing in an opera. Carmen, the Seattle Opera, had come to the thing. And, as I'm sitting in the audience waiting for my part to go up, some guy says, "Hey, you're a student here, right?" I say, "Yeah." He says, "Would you like to be a salesman on campus for this products?" Well, he wanted me to sell Apple computers. Of course, the Macintosh came out that year. It was 1984. And
was that person Steve Jobs that asked you?
I just wouldn't just have been the greatest thing. No, they had a store in Pendleton, Oregon, which is about 45 miles away. But I did sell the first Mac. A guy still works for Expedia, but to a kid on campus, a first Mac in Washington State. But I drove down to their store to take a look at the stuff, and I got hooked on their audio equipment. I don't know how you were in college, but I was buying a new piece of electronics every single month, trying it out, but, just trying the next new thing. Mm-hmm. And I listened to one of theirs, this brand, and I was just like, oh my God, it's like music. And so I got hooked on it and sold out their store and then made the calls on how to start my own store. That's how I started.
So what was your store that you had?
Well, it was called Tiger Technologies. And so it was it was a sound system store. Initially, it was Todd Productions, because I was also doing live recording for symphony orchestras, or I did sound for George Carlin and whoever else came to town.
Huh. And what were the other 2 companies you founded?
Well, then, of course, Hero School is an intellectual property company.
Okay.
And Heroes Inc. is how we deliver it to schools, businesses, how we develop the program. Or let's say if we're consulting with Oahu on, not just how to reverse the current homeless population, but how do you inoculate the kids in a public school district? who may be learning the 4 Habits of American Homelessness. So Heroes Inc. is the business that delivers that intellectual property.
All right. Let me, it's fascinating because like I could read your bio. I know we just talked earlier, like we met years ago. We have a lot of mutual friends. Frank Martin, who's a friend and client and previous guest on Takeaways. When I asked previous guests, who would you recommend? He recommended you. And I have a perception of what you do as it relates to Hero School, but the more I'm listening, I have no clue. I have no clue. So let's maybe shift here. You mentioned also you were singing in an opera. Let me go with this. So in your bio, went through your whole bio. There's a lot in there. You're an entrepreneur. You're an author, a speaker, a motivator, a literary passage quoter.
Yeah.
An athlete, an impersonator.
Might be kryptonite.
Maybe we'll get some impersonations.
Yes. Right.
Who's your favorite?
No, only middle school kids get them. But somehow to deliver a line, you have to at least try to deliver it in the character. And at one time when I was doing, 10 schools a week, I'd probably rotate between 16 different voices in a 1 hour assembly. So, but,
who were your top 3?
Well, I think the number one was and they're all bad, right? So it was the bad Schwarzenegger. Right. And so, which was a cross between someone trying to throw their tongue over the top of their larynx, versus, and also Hans and Franz from Saturday Night Live. So yeah, when you try to drive a point home, it's, very fun. I can't even pick up the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding without over accentuating those things. Yeah.
So that's how you keep kids, entertained. So impersonator, singer, truly dynamic, and a real change maker. So that I typically would go through your whole bio, but let's go to the beginning. You grew up in Las Vegas. You have a name like Tiger. You were run over by a drunk driver at age 4. You broke both legs, one leg?
Fractured one, and I think it was 3 breaks on the other, the hip.
And a fractured skull. Your parents got divorced after that, I imagine.
Not because of it.
Not because, but
no, for a number of other reasons. If I'm a piece of work, imagine my dad. No.
Yeah. But that's your upbringing. You grew up in Vegas.
Yes. My dad had
some challenges.
Had a sailboat business on Boulder Highway. He decided to go into
sailboat business in Las Vegas,
Southern Nevada, in 1969.
Oh, isn't the right place? Boulder Highway, close to Lake.
Yeah. So that was. He loved to sail. He was from the Eastern Shore, and he was also chief photographer for the RJ Review Journal. And I think there was even a stint where, in order to pay the bills, he was bagging groceries at the Safeway there at Nellis and Boulder Highway, which is Agavant. I don't know if it's still there, but yeah, he was a worker, hard worker. And, I look back at, how do someone know something? And a lot of people are educated through the normal, course of things. And, I kind of parallel mine to how did I unlock secrets that schools haven't, universities haven't? And it's like that Jamal and Slumdog Millionaire. Right. The, terrific movie, but you have a character who maybe only learned 16 out of the 1,000 things he should have known. But those 16 things were the ones that, unlocked the impossible in his life.
So you're like the core things that you learned. Was it because of the adversity in your childhood?
I don't know that it's adversity. I think, you learn to work. Right. You learn to take initiative, or I think in the original entrepreneur sense, right, to risk one's own. You're not afraid of just taking action first. Right. And I think a lot of entrepreneurship people are waiting for an angel investor. They've learned so much. There's a big hesitation. And I think in my generation, right on, you wanted to start something, you just started it. And so, there's that. And then I look back at how did I know the 4 Habits of American Homelessness? And as I look back to codify the School of Psychology, I said, oh, these were like my dad's principles and every other entrepreneur I knew. So they're pillars that make somebody who they are.
So keep going with grew up in Las Vegas. I know from what you said earlier, you made it to Seattle to go to school.
Yes. So I moved away at high school.
So you're here through high school. Where'd you go to high school?
I'm here until high school. I went yeah. And so my dad had.
Where'd you go to junior high school?
I went to Del Robinson Junior High.
Where is that?
That's Nellis and Harris.
Okay.
Yeah, it's over east side near Sunrise Mountain.
And then you go where for high school?
So then I went to South Whidbey High School. Initially, it was called Langley, in Langley, Washington, on South Whidbey Island. Yeah, an island north of Seattle.
Okay, and then you're there for college.
So then I'm there, and how did I get there? Like, it's a great question.
How did you get there?
So
we took one of your dad's sailboats.
Well, it was one of my dad's. Definitely because of the sailboat, and he wanted a place where he could just sail. And I don't know, and I think I've heard enough people in my dad's generation say, "I'm tired of the rat race," and so he cobbled together whatever he could to take the boat and have a place to sail. So he bought some property to have a dock. And that was attached to a golf course. And so now I'm at One Whidbey Island in high school, working there instead of at my dad's boat store like I did since I was 6 or 7 years old. So now I'm working the golf course, the restaurant. I'm learning, assistant greenskeeper, while during my high school experience. So that got us to Washington. Mm-hmm. And then it was one of the members in that club who I think I was accepted to MIT. I think also Stanford. But he mentioned Whitman, and it was in the state, and my dad really wanted that. So I applied to Whitman and got accepted to Whitman. And so that's where I went to Eastern Washington, wall to wall. Not the end of the world.
And that's where you
see it from there.
That's where you met Mr. Apple, whoever it was that came to the campus.
That's where I met the gentleman whose names I do not remember, but I think one of the guys was Carmen, the woman who played Carmen. It was her fiance who co-owned this store. Yeah.
So
that's a movie,
that
right?
gets you into electronics.
That gets me into electronics.
How did you get back to Vegas, or what brought you back to Vegas?
I wanted to expand the business or expand the store, but the first 4 years of that store in Las Vegas, I was broken into 23 times in 4 years. Right after the second time, you don't get insurance, right? And so, I think if it wasn't for we'll call it my Apple stock, right? Because not only did I sell Macs, but I was, as a fan. So if I bought any stock, it was Apple. And of course there was, I don't think I ever made any money in the electronics business, but, eventually had 3 or 4 stores, but that's what at least bought me the time in order to go do something else.
What was that something?
That was to follow money to a park and discover that there.
So yeah, I've heard you tell the story where you're an entrepreneur, you're donating money to a nonprofit. They invited you to come see what they're doing with the money.
Exactly.
And it's a local park.
Mm-hmm.
They invited you.
Ethel Pearson Park.
Where's that?
North Las Vegas. It's right.
Ethel Pearson?
Kitty corner across from KCEP. So that's D Street and Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there, you said there's some like 1,800 homeless people at this park.
Well, they were lined up out way past the park because when I arrived, the group that I'd given money to had like some rolling trailer right before they were food trucks, and they were cooking whatever they were cooking. So they fed the homeless. Someone says they help the homeless, but then they're feeding. But I about blew a gasket. Because my dad. I was run over by that drunk driver, drink milk, right? I don't know if you heard that in your generation, but if you needed to fix a broken bone, you got to keep drinking milk. And one day I go in the fridge and there's no milk. And, my dad being such a powerful man, he had forearms like Popeye, a nonstop worker. And I remember being afraid to even tell him we were out of milk. But then he also said, you better drink your milk. So I was afraid of not drinking my milk. So I said, Dad, we're out of milk. And here's what he said. No, we're going to have to go sell something or provide a service for somebody. And so here I am.
So you have to go sell something or provide a service in order to earn the money
to
be able to go buy milk.
An entrepreneur, you don't get a paycheck.
Doesn't get any more clear than that.
Yeah. So now I'm finding out that the money that I earned from my 110 hours a week working my business, now I'm finding out that they bought food with it, and these people didn't do anything.
So why did that bother you? So you're giving money to quote unquote help the homeless.
Yes.
Their expression of help is to
feed people.
Yes. And you didn't deem that as helpful.
No.
All right. So what happened? You get to this park, you see all these people, you see the food.
So
what happened then?
So I probably in my angst, I just decided to walk the line and find out who these people were. And I started walking and asking, and kept. I think I interviewed every single one of those. I've counted them all. 1,854, I believe, was the number, and that's when I came back to realize I kept hearing the same four things. So
you're literally walking as they're waiting in line to get food.
Yes.
You're literally walking person to person. What kind of questions are you asking them?
Yeah. What are you doing here? Where are you from? And they of course would offer things. And it's from that that I was starting to glean, what made these people. And so, it all presupposes what you've been taught that a human being is, right? Because literally, if your first thought is feeding someone, that's the same thing you would do with a lost pet that helped your pony well at night, right? Little cat comes over, first thing you're thinking is to give it some food or some water. And I think humans are very different. So if I get as a cutaway, probably last year at the Vons at Twain and Maryland Parkway, as I'm, before we're doing another Hero School Breakthrough Academy for the homeless, I see a guy dumpster diving in the back behind the Vons. And except he's dumpster diving, a 30-year-old man dumpster diving for food. When I was in 5th grade, because of what my dad taught me, I was dumpster diving, making $600 a week in recyclables month as a 5th grader at the house he got from my grandmother and me in Henderson, because I was taught that you get stuff to earn, sell, provide a service that creates the money. So I was after school, I would just go right to the apartment complexes and jump in the dumpster and collect all the Coors bottles for a penny a piece, and all these aluminums, and I would take that to get it recycled and make cash. So I looked at this. I somehow had this sight of the conversation I was hearing from these people lined up for food in the park, 1995. From that little, when I was the kid, and that's, I was that kid. I wouldn't dumpster dive for food. I never eat first. In fact, isn't there a great business book, Years Eat Last, right? Yeah. So, leaders eat last. Yeah. So so that got me as, they must not have had the same education. So when I saw them as human beings who got the wrong education. That was just my quick take. My Malcolm Gladwell blink when I arrived in the park. 15 years before Malcolm Gladwell wrote Blink.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating that, first of all, you're set off a bit because of your upbringing, because of the influence from your father and how he raised you, but that you would go and walk in that line and talk to everybody. It's not I guess, I don't know if it's typical or not typical. You imagine people are contributing their dollars so they don't have to spend the time sometimes to do that. But you did that and you learned a lot.
It's I think originally from the Talmud, we get the Buddha saying it. And of course, I read it first in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, where he said, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And much of that first experience got me looking at, who am I, right? It's also one of the top themes in movies, right? Who am I? Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Peter Quill. And of course, my other favorite theme is the one you and I discussed the other day, right? It's like, society hates a truth teller, right? Jaws, right? Sheriff Brody, A Few Good Men, right? That no one wants to hear the truth if they have an agenda. And that day it was my first experience with anything like this. And so, I was just inquisitive, curious.
So what did you do next?
So what did I do next? So I got on the phone probably that same weekend and called all my friends. I sold car stereo systems and high-end homes, speakers that, tall speakers and things like that, good sounding home sound systems. And so I called a pro audio guy, and I said, hey, how do I get a sound system loud enough to cover this area? And I told him about the park and all the area behind it. And so that week I bought a massive sound system, and I called Ahern Rentals, ordered a bunch of 300 chairs, I think, because I was too cheap to buy for 1,800. And a stage, and rented all that stuff. And I wrote another check to that organization. And I says, can you go feed the people again? And so I brought everything out there and set up the stage, except now I had my microphone, and I watched them all line up, probably all the same people. And right, if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
And except before the food was cooked and they're all lined up, I got on the mic and I said, "Hey, thanks for coming out. But if you're going to eat, you're going to have to sit down and listen to me for an hour and a half." And of course, what the reaction there is.
Well, I imagine there's an audible sigh through this crowd of 1,800
no,
people.
they just flip on you. They turn on you.
So they're yelling.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, all the expletives, all that stuff. But look, if you pay, you preach, right? It's like back then you could literally tell your employees what to do because you were paying them. And so if I'm paying for this, then I say, this is how it's going to be. So they begrudgingly made their way, filled the chairs eventually, and then filled the rest of the park. And I started to address the 4 things, what I now know is the 4 habits of American homelessness. I started to address those 4 things in that class, kind of neutralize, what it was. And
why do you say American homelessness?
Well, because, a lot of people confuse homelessness with houselessness, right? There's a million ways to end up without a place to live, right? But homelessness, if you're a human being, right? You're houseless if you're a pet. But human beings become what they learn, right? You're not entitled because I gave you something. You're entitled because you became the kind of person waiting for an entitlement, right?
Okay.
So it's very critical how people help other people. So yes, we have all kinds of original psychological studies on what happens to animals. They'll salivate if they're expecting to be fed at a certain time. And while humans can become that way, unfortunately, it's far below human's nature. So I started to address, what did these people learn to become these kinds of people? And how do we neutralize that and get them back to becoming, as Abraham Maslow would say, more fully human? So that's why I say it that way. They're human beings.
I learned about Maslow in high school, so I understand where you're coming from with that. I could hear someone hearing this who might think like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Human, not human, learned, not learned. Now, I know enough to know that everything you're saying has a depth to it, and it's not just how you're feeling about them or how you're judging, quote unquote, judging them when you say somebody is homeless or houseless. I know also under this topic of homelessness, it's unhoused now. Is like, I don't know if that's the buzzword or if that's the proper word. Or I grew up, I was always homeless.
Yeah,
I've never heard the term houseless.
Yeah, houseless is a term we've used to differentiate the two. Unhoused, not germane to, well, maybe it's germane to this this podcast, but you need to look up a little comedian named Drew Lynch, who has a great bit on why you can't call him homeless anymore. But depending on if you haven't solved the problem, you don't get to write the new name for it. And so is William James said, right? Harvard, 1906, truth is what works. And so I didn't know that it wasn't hard to turn those people around very, very quickly by just neutralizing these 4 habits. It was 92.84% effective after a 90-minute experience, large group.
Okay, let's pause for a second.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier you've been doing this for 29 years. So the first day was when you got the microphone.
First day with the microphone, 1,850.
Research and development was your first day walking the line, talking to everybody. Why are you here? Who are you? Why are you here?
Right. Yes.
And then the next weekend, you're there now to like, we're open for, Hero School's open for business, so to speak.
Yeah.
The first thing you changed is, if you want to eat, the way that I was raised is you don't get paid first. First you work, and work today is you have to sit here for 90 minutes and listen to me.
Yeah. Right. They don't pay us first.
They didn't like it, but they did it because they want to eat.
Right.
They wanted maybe someone might call it an entitlement or help or whatever it is, but there's a price, just like the real world. So first 90 minutes, I can only imagine. I'm curious, like, what was in your presentation? How did you prepare for this? And then fast forward to 29 years later, it's
Yeah.
probably evolved.
Oh yeah.
Did you on that first day already have the words for there's 4?
Well, yeah, I knew
What is it again? 4?
I knew what the 4 habits.
4
we'll call it
habits.
as 4 habits of American homelessness. I knew what those were, but it wasn't until
Did you call it that day?
no, I just the 4 habits that the homeless had. You know,
Okay.
that I experienced walking that line. Yeah, it was. And again, like anything else, you all know stuff, right? It's Emerson, right? Every man is my superior in some way, in that I learned from him or her.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we're all good at stuff other people suck at. We have gifts separate from our crap. But so I was instinctively responding as who I was in that day and with the authority of I was paying for the day. So then discovering that, you know, to me, it was just the homeless that were in that line. You know, it wasn't like it was the antidote for homelessness. I didn't know it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, I was surprised, but I will give you 2 other surprising data points from that first group that eventually, you know, because I did it nearly every Saturday now for the next 3.5 years until there were only 13 homeless people left in that neighborhood. And they weren't going to do anything I told them. They were just asking me to go to the city to build them a bathroom. So
3 years you've brought it down from 1,800 to...
Yeah, it was 10,213 total. Yeah.
So, and now do you have confirmation that they stopped being homeless, that they found a better path?
Well, I mean, yeah, I get letters and emails. Usually get the letters about 10 years later.
Because I could be cynical and say they just stopped coming to listen to you preach.
Could just be that. Yeah. But no, we have,
but you have,
we have lots of that. I got like 66,000 letters just from kids in middle school. And,
that comes later.
Yeah, that comes later.
Okay.
And, but
so 3 years you're working on.
And I didn't think of it as working. I just thought of this is something I can do.
If I'm going to help, this is my version
I can do
of help.
this. Yeah, I can do this. And, yeah. And so, yeah, again, wasn't really thinking of it. And
so
then
you
when
showed
they
up,
were-
I'm not going to feed you. My help isn't to feed you. My help is to help you find a better path.
Yeah, you do this, then you'd have lunch.
Got it.
Right? You know, you know, because it's like a seminar.
Yeah, but this for you was I'm here to affect change.
Yes, this is and jumping to the, let's say we have, 30 different types of interventions based on the type of homeless person or the scenario today. So you have to start, first you have to make a decision, right? Am I trying to, let's say it's three different choices here. The first one, are you trying to help the homeless because you have an inner need? Are you doing it because you're paid or you're sent by a city, county grant? Again, and that's almost self-service because you're getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you trying to free them from the condition? And of course, that's where any real science happens. A lot of people are doing their PhD work just so they can get tenure and another grant, which is not heroic.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we look at the motivation behind why, because you're almost looking at why do they keep growing homelessness, right? Who are these next people that are homeless? Why is this happening? And I realized, there's a motive in it, right? There's also the type of person, right? I can't do your job anymore and you can do my job. And yet everyone just assumes. I always had a luncheon, if I can take this, devolve to this one. I was at a luncheon about 6 months ago. And, you're meeting people as a business luncheon. And, I said, well, what do you do to this guy? He comes over and says hello. I said, what do you do? And he says, well, I work for a pharmaceutical company in the Bay Area. And, we've just come up with a new treatment for Alzheimer's. I was intrigued. And he says, by doing this with the proteins, we do this, that, and the other. And it showed 42% efficacy. And it was just, I was fascinated by this, listening to him for 3-4 minutes, tell about this. He says, well, what do you do? And I says, well, I'm, homelessness prevention and reversal consultant. And for the next 2 minutes, he goes on to tell me about homelessness.
Instead of asking you.
What kind of area? I mean, I don't know what other industry there's that kind of arrogance where everyone thinks they're an expert or they can just do it because they were homeless. That's like saying that yesterday's criminal will make tomorrow's best cop. Right? The best teacher is the best teacher. Experience is not the best teacher. Experience only confirms good or bad teaching.
Mm.
The problem is human beings are the only species on the planet that become what they learn. You learn engineering, change into an engineer. Learn accounting, you don't change into an engineer, you change into account.
Mm-hmm.
Learn plumbing, right? And we see the world through this. We actually literally become what we learn. And so the problem is humans also become what they learn. So when I was doing hero schools at Juvie around 1999 and 2000, they became what they learned. Just they learned from a pack of guys, acted like, what up, dog? And pretty soon they're in cages just like dogs you can't trust. Pack behavior. So you start to realize that, oh yeah, humans are special. We can't change that the human becomes what they learn. We can only change what we learn and who we learn from. Right? And not everyone can deliver certain things in a certain way.
So how did you say it? A homeless prevention
and reversal consultant.
Yeah.
So I just expected people who said they had a homeless problem would want to reach out to me. Governor Ige's office, I get to Honolulu, and then his entire staff, not the governor at that time, but his entire staff tries to tell me about what they're doing, like trying to show off their plans. And I'm thinking,
how's that working out for you?
I just thought that voice would go off in their own heads.
Yeah.
You didn't call me here to insult you, right? You've called me here because you have a problem. And that's where bumper stickers, and they come up with these slogans. And apparently they didn't think through all their slogans. Look, I came from entrepreneur thinking, right? And if you've been at Best Buy for 5 years and you haven't closed the sale of that TV yet, probably time to let you go. So I'm wondering why all these people just keep rotating through the next, like Gavin Newsom celebrating 5 years since his last failed 10-year plan to solve homelessness. I'm trying to figure out, how do you people still have jobs? Time for some rehabilitation.
We can double click on quote unquote solving homelessness.
Okay.
So
movies are more fun.
So you're in the park. It's been 3 years. Population substantially reduces. By your count, you have reversed 10,000 homeless people. Free them of the condition. You have letters to prove it. So that's 3 years. You've been doing this for close to 30. Walk me through then what happens. When does Hero School, the nonprofit, start?
Right after we finished. Yeah, right after we finished, we thought that the people that had learned how to carry on this philosophy message that worked, that we needed to have, let's say a charitable organization for it. And again, and I might be wrong about this, right? Because I was raised, by my dad, and this was where I got most of my entrepreneurship training. And, I just thought that problems were made to be solved. And I expected that, you create a nonprofit as a delivery system for a solution. And I learned that that's rarely the case. So we set that up. It was actually called the Las Vegas Faith Center. We were going to create it was an organization to help people have faith that they could overcome things. And now, the DBA is Hero School Community Initiatives, because its primary thing is delivering this, this one thing. But there was no one left in the park. And then one of the people that was one of the volunteers that helped me take care of most of my customers or friends that helped do this, a team of 20 probably every weekend. And they said, "Oh, you should talk to kids." And I said, "I have no interest in talking to kids," but they worked for the college, and they said, "Oh no."
So you're at this point like a refined public speaker?
No, I literally,
you don't see it as
I thought of it as just something I can do with my time because, because
well, I'm saying is that the feedback you're getting from the people around you is you should now talk to this audience.
Yeah, but it never clicked with me. I'm not that bright when people talk. It's like playing tennis, right? The ball you can't return is the one hit right at you.
Yeah.
Right. So, I discovered so many of these things later. I was terminally naive. So I eventually said yes to this program in the Clark County School District that said, "Oh, you can go talk to kids about careers." So I remember I chose a school, and maybe because of ego, but I went to the one in my old neighborhood that the mascot were the Tigers. And here I am at Von Tobel Middle School, and got a class, maybe 20 kids. And I just told what I'd been doing for the last 3 years. So yeah, this, that, and the other, this is what I learned, this is what we did, and what like that. And, these are some of the things that you'd have to do as a entrepreneur who was able to retire and do these things. 20 minutes, maybe, my whole presentation. And this little girl back of the room, seventh graders, she popped up from her chair and she says, "That's not true. All homeless people have mental problems." And this could have been the defining moment for the rest of my life. First, I was furious that in the classroom, the teacher had lost control of her classroom to where a student would do that to another teacher. Remember, because of that car accident, my 6 months and 2 body casts and the kids chasing me into the street because of my name, my dad didn't let me have kid friends. All my birthday parties was at the back of my dad's boat store, him and 12 of his customers drinking Seagram's VO. And also so when I got to kindergarten, right, the first person I befriended looked like my dad's friends. Mm-hmm. So I befriended the teacher. So I only listened to and learned from the teacher. So my first grade, I'm grading papers and, and so learning from the teacher. I thought that's what school was for. I didn't realize there was this whole idea where kids learned from each other, but I saw it with those homeless. I saw that that's habit 3 of American homelessness. We call it horizontal learning. So I got into this classroom here because this kid, that's not true. She's telling me this. And, so I remember leaving the school and I still had to pull over and I called my assistant. "All right, what's going on?" And she says, "This is what's going on today." And she says, "You sound like you're angry." And I says, "Well, I am." "Well, what happened?" And, "Did they take your milk?" "No." And she said,
"7th grade girl took my milk."
She took my milk. And now I said, "Yeah, can you believe this little girl stood up and said all homeless people have mental problems?" And without a hesitation, my assistant, she said, "Well, that was on Ally McBeal last night." I don't know if you remember the TV show Ally McBeal. Yeah. Well, apparently there was an episode where Ally's dating some guy and they can't find him for a few days. Oh, he's homeless. He has mental problems. Mm. And so now I'm realizing the kids in a classroom are learning from TV more than their teachers. Mm. And that got me then to realize, look, I left this classroom where the kids by 7th grade had already learned the 4 habits of homelessness, right? Because before I left, they practiced habit 1. That was the habits 3 and 4. Anyway, so that probably triggered in me the desire now to do as many schools as I could to, in my own special way, inoculate them through a school assembly from at least those 4 habits.
All right. So what are the 4 habits? You've talked about them a few times.
Yeah. So the 4 habits are...
What's number 1?
They're literally the opposite of what I call those 4 laws of entrepreneurship. Well, habit 1, everyone knows what habit 1 of a homeless person is. It's begging. It's asking for your stuff first. And yet every entrepreneur, by definition, adds value first, right? We invest before we expect a return. We plant a seed before we expect a crop, right? The first entrepreneurs were farmers. We send our ship out before we expect our ship to come in, right? Mm-hmm. Well, my ship hasn't come in. Well, did you send one out, right? Because it's not coming in if you didn't send it out, right? And so that's so typical, though. And that's fine if you're a 13-year-old. All 13-year-olds probably beg from their parents. It just doesn't work when you're over the age of 18 and now society is being hard on you. Mm-hmm. So if you can convert them from that first habit, they're 25% out of the condition. And there's a way in which we teach that. How do you get them, instead of asking for stuff, how to ask what they can do to get their own stuff? Mm-hmm. Okay. The second habit that I heard in this line is that they were blaming. And they were that, so-and-so that I married, my boss is a blankety blank. They would just go down the blank. And I never doubt what the people tell me barely registers, right? It's how they tell me, and that is a habit. So, I didn't judge whether it was true or not. That was irrelevant.
It's true to them.
Yeah, but it could have been totally true. I don't doubt that somebody was living in another state. Like I said, not one of those homeless people were from Las Vegas. Over 3.5 years, more than 10,000. And all but 5 of them told me they were Christians. So I'm trying to put 2 and 2 together on who taught you that and how did they teach? So the second habit was blaming. And so, you got to convert them because look, you're an entrepreneur. I don't know, there are books on extreme accountability. What we want most in our staff and employees is to be accountable, responsible for what they do. We obviously want our children to grow up to be responsible. And yet the entrepreneur, especially the founder, small business in my generation, you're the last line of defense. You're like that movie True Lies, right? Remember Omega Sector? You got, Arnold and Tom, and they walk into this place, with their boss, but it's a sign on the floor, Omega Sector, the last line of defense, right? If you don't have money to pay your bills, your overhead, your shop, and your 5 days before the first of the month, or, it's all on you. And that turns something on inside a person. And so we call it take the blame. So that's the antidote. That's the second principle of an entrepreneur. We take the blame even for stuff we didn't do. And
it's the buck stops here kind of a thing.
Yeah.
No matter what, the buck stops here.
And the show must go on.
Right.
Right. So the customer might not always be right, but they're the customer. So what do you have to do to keep moving forward with it?
Yes.
You know this. Yeah. Better than I do, probably. And so I saw this begging and blaming, and then, versus, add value first and take the blame. And the third one, it's every third grade classroom. There's only one expert in the classroom, and that's the teacher. And yet in a typical public school classroom, on the back left row, there are 3 boys who live on the same cul-de-sac. And whenever the teacher, the only expert, says something, they turn and look at each other and translate everything she says from her master's degree through their third grade brain, through their nonverbals using, the 738-55 rule. UCLA, who's the guy that gave us the 738-55 rule. Oh, it's his life's work. Oh, anyway, it escapes me.
I'm going to have to Google that one later.
We'll have to find this out. Yes. So Dr. Albert Moravian, right? So he has discovered that only 7% is through words, oral or written. 38% of the emotional impact is through tone and attitude, but 55% is nonverbal. Now, I know they teach it's body language, but I watch the movies and they don't zoom in on Denzel Washington's elbow, right? It's what the face is saying, right? So you put that together with looking through the face of a 5th grader who doesn't even have prefrontal cortex, right? And you start to recognize that, horizontal learning keeps you perpetually.
That's the third one, horizontal learning.
Horizontal learning. And of course, vertical learning, we discussed it with Emerson's quote, everyone's my superior, we learn vertically. And then when you do get, let's say, back to the 4 principles, when you do get a Mr. Miyagi, an expert, Edna Mode in The Incredibles, right? Chubbs and Happy Gilmore. And they tell you, wax the car, right? Or they tell you, go fight, do this. They tell you whatever. You just do it to prove it. But the homeless, the habits we're begging, all of them, blaming, learning horizontally, and then talking back or telling a story. In fact, if you've ever bumped into a homeless person at one of your properties, you know that they usually launch right into a story. They start with a story. I like what Jim Rohn says about stories. I heard about Jim Rohn about 7-8 years ago. But, he says, how many calls did you make this week? And the guy says, well, see, I had this. And then he said, the reason why this box is so small is so the story won't fit. I just need it. And so it's a great example of that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Messing up your podcast.
No, I was just going back, like begging, blaming, horizontal learning.
And then talking back, telling a story. In the science, we call it being unteachable.
Okay. What's 4 on the entrepreneur side?
Add value first.
Yeah.
We take the blame. We learn vertically and then do it to prove it.
Do it to prove it. Okay.
Yeah, because you can't understand. I have a Nietzsche reader from when I was, trying to find out any other stories of mythology that line up to what I accidentally did in the park that worked. And I found, Nietzsche, and I found Ubermensch, but there was one where, you get like notes from collected letters, and where he's philosophically saying something like, what do you mean you don't understand me? How can you possibly understand me? I'm me, And he says, but 100 years from now, people will begin to understand. And you start to look at the arrogance that, teenagers have, where they say, well, help me understand. I said, well, I can't grow that interior singlet this fast. I can't help you understand. But we do through the movies. We find out that, yeah, every character in the film has to declare a destination of where they're headed, the outer journey. But only by taking steps through that does, say, Happy Gilmore start to understand what he really needed. So the understanding happens through a journey process. And so, do it to prove it, it should shut down any of that conversation back. Well, how is wax on, wax off going to help me? No, just wax on, wax off, paint the fence. And then when you're challenged, you'll find out you became the kid who can't get hit, which was the purpose of the training in the Karate Kid. Not the Kung Fu Kid, the one with Jackie Chan.
That one's coming out, right?
No, well,
no.
The new one's coming. New one's coming out where that merges the two. But Did you watch the Cobra Kai series at all? I jumped in on a couple of the sessions, and it was nostalgic to me. But that's not where I live in the structure and the formulas of things. But I watched.
I think I watched the first 3. I don't know how many there are, 4 or 5.
Yeah, maybe that's
seasons. I don't know.
That's maybe where I was.
And I thought maybe it was early on. It was when Daniel LaRusso and what's the other guy's name that he kicked in the nose? The blonde guy. What was his name in the movie?
I would have remembered it yesterday. Sorry.
Anyway, so they're old now and they're driving together, and it's so corny.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my wife, "This is so corny."
Yes.
But I loved it. Like I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
And I stopped after I think it was the first season.
And I think that they did a great job on relatable characters, right? Because you think about the guy that won the match or King and Queen of the Prom, right? They got some additional help in the community, that opened a door for them. But we never stopped to think about who's the kid that lost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what they had to go through. So I appreciated it.
It was so good. It was so well done.
Yeah.
It took a few episodes for the writing and all that stuff to come out.
Yeah.
But it came out. All right, we're going to pick up here. I'm going to pause for a second. I ask everyone this question. We might have already touched on it, but I want to ask you officially this question. What's been the single most influential thing or event in your life that has shaped you the most?
That has shaped me the most, I want to think it was that episode with the little girl in the class who said, homeless people have mental problems, and the whole idea that our public schools are filled with kids telling the teachers how it is. Because it really started a need. And that really was what began prevention. That prevention isn't houselessness prevention. It's how do you keep kids, today's teenagers, from becoming tomorrow's homeless adults? And there's a way, right? It's in the education. And so that was very influential. Of course, another one, because I'm always frustrated when people don't look stuff up, right? And you've looked stuff up that I don't even know where you looked it up. You're very good at this. But, it was probably when my second wife left me. I was sitting in the house. Yeah, she starts up the truck and the horse trailer driving away. And then they go, what kind of one that leaves you for a horse? And then I started to realize, what's going on? So I started to not do things the same way. I decided to go through and pack stuff up in the house because the first one broke me for 10 years. My first broken relationship with a woman was an opera singer, and I was devastated, and just didn't know how to deal with it. Emotionally, even look at how I was growing up. I didn't learn how to form good relationships anyway. If I have friends, it's because they are amazing, right? I'm just the guy that leaps in to save the day. But the second one, I looked in our library and I had here's this book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And that's in our library. I didn't even know who Stephen was, but it was there. And I remember opening the book and I'd already set the unofficial world record getting homeless people off the streets. I thought I was this good guy. And here I'm clearly not the good enough for this role. And I opened the book and I started to read, and I got to his discussing Viktor Frankl. And so let's say this is 1999, maybe the year 2000. And so I got in the car and drove down to, I think it was Borders at that time. Borders had a bookstore. And I bought a book by Viktor Frankl. And I'm reading Viktor Frankl, and he said something. He said, live today as if living already, or again in the German, for the second time. And you're about to act as wrongly as you did the first. And it struck me that so much of our lives will repeat unless we learn something different or something new. That the learning of the new is often very scary. But so that's why we would default into something, however horrible. At least I'm familiar with it, right? And so he said that. And then here's the best part, and part maybe something I've leveraged into every single Hero School sense. He said that if you can live today as if living already for the second time, and you take a different step, you pause long enough to recognize that going down this road is just going to bring you back to the same spot, then while the past might not be able to be changed, it can be amended. And so you look at the lives of people that, they had 8 felonies, but they're, 5 TV shows, right? Because of the past is now looked at differently by them also. Many of the people that I help, I had a guy with 26 misdemeanors in one of my homeless classes I did at Catholic Charities, and so, he just kept doing the same thing over and over because he couldn't see himself breaking free of whatever the stigma was, whenever somebody, checked his resume. So if just by helping him take another chance using this piece of information that delivered me, it actually got me building something again instead of, oh, woe is me, or I suck. So it was starting with that 7 habits and then discovering the Viktor Frankl. I immediately bought 30 copies. A good friend was Edith Katz-Yarchever. And I asked her, this guy, Viktor Frankl, survived 4 Nazi concentration camps, and she says, I don't know who that is. I immediately bought 30 copies and put them right down.
Which book? Was it Man's Search for Meaning?
It was originally Man's Search for Meaning. I've since probably read 25, 30 of his books. But
I didn't realize he had actually so many other books.
Had an entire new life on the other side of his worst day.
I had a college professor that told us to read. He was a business professor, funny enough, that said we're going to read Man's Search for Meaning as a class. So if anyone doesn't know, the book is Viktor Frankl, is he psychologist or psychiatrist?
Well, he really wasn't either in the beginning.
I thought he went into the concentration camp already with the education.
He had some, but I think I thought it was more medical, kind of like, William James enters Harvard on the medical side, and then psychology becomes a new breaking, category.
Either way, the book is written so it's two parts. The first part is his experience in the concentration camps. And the second part is like observations of that experience.
Yes.
So you read the first part, you're like, it's not sobbing, maybe you're sobbing, but it's moving. And you realize like the worst thing that we deal with in 2025 is nothing compared to what they dealt with in those few years. That's one. But then the other part is just profoundness on profoundness on profoundness.
Yeah.
But come to find out, he's got more books.
Yes, Man's Search for Ultimate Meaning, The Will to Meaning, and a lot of it that he wrote because he loved talking to college audiences, right? And many of these people we discover after they passed on. Joseph Campbell, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, written in 1949, but the world didn't know who Joseph Campbell was until the year after he was dead, or in my case, 10 years. So you see so much of this investment in life of wisdom. What the thing about Frankl, not just the live today as if living already for the second time, but he founded logotherapy, and of course, logos, the Greek word for meaning. The New Testament would translate it as the word, but there's so much more to the depth of these translated words. But what he used with paradoxical intention, remember that?
No.
Yeah. So he talked about this widower who didn't know how to live without his love, and what Frankl did. We would call it psychological jujitsu, but it was so much more because Frankl was the guy. And today we're kind of in a world where someone wants
finish
to
the widower. How did he? I do remember.
Yeah. So
man comes to see him.
Yeah. He says, I have no reason to live.
My wife passed away.
Because my wife passed away. She was everything to me. And he said, do you think if the roles were reversed and she had survived you, how would she have felt? Oh, it would have destroyed her. And he says, well, then can't you see by you surviving her, you've saved her from that? Just Amazing.
Yeah, I do remember. I don't remember it when you said paradoxical. What was
Intention.
it? Intention.
Yeah.
But I remember the widower from that story. And this is now over 20 years ago, probably, when I read that.
Yeah. So I brought 30
It's
copies.
good stuff.
There was the Jewish Federation had an office there at Trop and Flamingo. And I remember they had a little library there, and I came with my box of 30 copies of Man's Search for Me. I said, I think you should have these books. Oh, thank you. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So you're currently married.
Yes.
Elena. How'd you meet Elena?
Cruising the strip. No, I was, I was at a good friend's Christmas party, and I got a call from a woman named Evelyn Canestra. Evelyn was like former Foreign Service, so really I just see her as a CIA operative, like Elastigirl at 90 years old. But this woman, this dynamo, she says, you have to come over to this house party. I says, I'm here at a Christmas party. I'm really not. And then she told me how far away. It wasn't that far or whatever. I need you to meet the owner of this house. He really cares about the stuff like that. And he worked for Disney. I'm thinking, all right, so I'll do it for an hour. So I zipped away, and that's where I initially met this woman, Elena, on Christmas Eve. And then a month later, I got a call from this Elena, invited me to her birthday party. And then I went through my series of all these horrible tests. And then she showed up to a hero school to attend one of the ones we did in Henderson. And this is, people try to still get it back to work because that recession lasted a long time, a high employment, right? The unemployment rate was like 14.1 at that time. So we were doing hero schools to help people get back to making a better pitch to get hired, adding more value instead of extracting. And she attended that, and then pretty soon she started volunteering. And
why did you invite her to come see?
Yeah, I let her know what I was doing, and so so
she was curious and came to check it out.
Exactly, yeah. And next thing you know, she's volunteering at every single hero school. And the next thing you know, we're walking down the aisle. It's like, how does this happen? Yeah, so she's an extraordinary woman.
And now you work together.
Yes, so I'm in charge of education. She and Carolyn Allen run the nonprofit. Yeah.
Very cool. So I don't know if it was one of her weekly emails to your guys' database that I'm on, or if it was something that you posted. But I'm going off of memory here, so we'll see if this rings a bell or not, and you can fill in any errors I have. It was a story about you. Maybe you were driving, you saw a homeless woman on the street, the sidewalk, I imagine. She was younger. That was a point like in the description. She was younger. You pulled over and you talked about how you described how you approached her. I think earlier you talked about 30 ways of intervention.
Yeah.
This is when you said that, it kind of rang my bell about this might be one. What struck me as I'm reading this is like how experienced and aware you were on how to approach somebody like this. Not stupid, like I'm going to pull over and walk up to her and say, hey, can I help you? She is homeless, female, younger, and you, male, bigger. All of a sudden you pull over and you're like, she immediately would feel threatened.
Good.
Right? Am I remembering this correctly?
Well, I don't,
something you might have talked about ever or no?
Some months I'll do up to 1,400 of these. So
okay.
I think you divided by now by the age and stuff. I'm not sure that you've.
So you talked about how you approach, like there's a soft approach, a secondary approach, and what you're doing is you're building trust to a point where now she's receptive to accepting things from you. I think there was like socks that you were going to give her. You had stuff in your car that you were going to.
Yeah. So it actually isn't building trust because we bypass trust completely. And that's probably why, what's the data? They say some cities say it takes them 16 to 20 interactions to get a homeless person to trust them. Well, first off, if you really want to free them from homelessness, you have to act like the transport. Remember the Jason Statham movies? Right? He had these rules. Never look at the package, right? Never change the deal. No names, right? And so interventions that work when you don't let them become familiar. So we're not looking for an 18-month program to get someone more dependent on an organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for a magical moment that they'll never forget that has them reach inside them and extract their own power to start taking some different action. So, we do we have to do what's called a preemptive strike, right? If habit 1 is begging, and habit 4 is telling a story. You can never start the conversation in a way that they're first begging. They're in charge. If they beg, they're in charge. You've already lost your ability to free them from homelessness. So it has to be a second trip, right? If they start with a story. So preemptive strike means you have to ask a question that puts them on their heels. So it is, yes, a progression, but it's not one of trust. It's one remembering. It's one remembering the 4 habits and the condition they're in. Now, someone on the street, you have to take a quick, Malcolm Gladwell blink. Determine, are they homeless or houseless, right? Is this a short term? You have to really assess some stuff like Terminator very quickly. So I don't remember exactly the one that you brought up here. I do remember a woman in the rain. Not a few years ago, that I only remember her name as Susanna, but the anatomy of one of these interactions is you really start with a shock that does scare them, and then immediately take that away. So, for example, last week, I get a call from our friends at the Phoenician on the nonprofit, and I get this text saying, the food banks are closed and it's spring break and we have a convention with all this nutrition. And I said, I'm there. Let's work to pack it up. Let's get people and let's get it out to these families and things. Well, in the middle of that, I'm going to run into some homeless people. So here are the 2 scariest looking homeless dudes, and they're walking on a back street parallel to Spring Mountain in Decatur. And so I immediately come scary. See, so I come at them with, what's this guy going to do? And, one guy's way taller than me. The other guy's got more tattoos than the tattoo shop has on their wall. And so you start with that because that's what the movies do, right? They start with this inciting incident or this shock. And so I start walking at them like nothing like that. And I say, you look like you could use some of these frittatas. so that is the shock of, they can't imagine that this is what would be next. So many of the interactions are playing on, on their heightened fear. And then that emotion opens them up to be receptive to teaching, to coaching. And again, some of the interactions, my intervention, it might be 12 people in 7 minutes. We're not going to reverse homelessness at the rate in which people are succumbing to it unless we start using much faster, much larger scale interventions and experiences. And so all these other ones where you learn the person's name and you take them through something, that hasn't even worked for the American Psychological Association. People still dependent on their therapist after 20 years. I have them on my psychology team. They call me a long day. They don't even want to go to lunch anymore. He says, all right, that's enough for this 1 hour lunch, so, but again, we have a huge need. We need faster tools. We're not building a new family. We're freeing them to have their own family, their own life, their own movie, not be an extra in ours.
So much influence from movies for you.
So much influence.
What's that about? Just watching them over and over in the electronics store?
Yeah, I think you're watching the same scene from Ghostbusters over and over again, or Happy Gilmore, and maybe you can relate to talking back, but when
there's 2 things. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
there's 2 things sort of. Movie formats work, I imagine, for a reason. There's a huge social experiment on what's the right amount of time for a movie based on us as humans. You've referenced it. It has to happen in the speed of movie. So I know everyone knows what I'm talking about. You go to a movie, it lasts a certain amount of time. You're good for that amount of time. We also know when there's a long movie, it's like, oh, this one's a long one. It's like a special occasion that you have to prepare yourself for if it's longer than normal. So you've taken that sort of template, it sounds like, and said, okay, our stuff has to work at the speed of a movie. Is it 90 minutes or what's the...
Yeah, 90 minutes to 2 hours. So every session is 90 minutes to 2 hours.
So 90 minutes to 2 hours. And the other thing, Hero's School, the hero's journey. I know the hero's journey as a writing template. I can't remember exactly who I picked it up from.
Yeah. And Michael Haig wrote that book, The Writer's Journey. He was the story consultant for Disney. And he found this template, this map with Joseph Campbell and so forth. Yeah. So
Joseph Campbell gets credit for it. You referenced him.
Well, earlier. He gets credit for so he came up with the universal formula for the hero's journey. So 6,000 years of human history, hundreds and hundreds of cultures, attributions from anthropologists like Sebastian, right, who found elementary ideas. In other words, these ideas could not be connected to different tribes or naturally or organically. So it must be something, in us, right? Like and Michael Haig, Christopher Vogler. Michael Haig is a different story consultant, but Christopher Vogler wrote The Writer's Journey. And so, but Chris says we're like cable ready. We're like wired for stories to be delivered in this way. Originally, they were all oral traditions, as you told, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those things were only spoken until about the 1800s. So I think we're finding things that we respond to, and the movies we don't like are the movies that fail to capture those pieces. So the parts that you found when you write, those were, do you have a list of those?
Yeah. So I learned this probably from Stephen Pressfield, who's an author, talking about it with somebody else. And then I started looking into what is this hero's journey thing. And it's a writing template. And you could take anyone, any hero, quote unquote hero. So Jesus Christ, you could take Jesus Christ story, Simba from Lion King, Neo from Matrix, Luke Skywalker, Julia Roberts' character, Pretty Woman, literally any hero, and take them through this template. So there's an ordinary world, a call to adventure, refusing the call. So initially,
most heroes
refuse the call. Neo said, "No, I can't do this." Meeting the mentor, Morpheus comes in, crossing the first threshold. Which pill do you want to take?
Yeah.
Tests, enemies, allies. So there's all this stuff happening. Then there's the big ordeal. He has to become Neo.
Yeah.
Then there's the reward.
Yeah.
And then he returns the road back home as the hero. Now, when you look up the hero's journey, there's like 34 of these things, but that's my best condensed version of it. So I discovered this and I'm like, this is so fascinating. And we've heard this. You mentioned earlier, the formula of communication and how much of it is nonverbal versus verbal.
Yeah.
And you hear that just stories are powerful. We remember stories.
Yeah.
And so you have this template of the hero's journey. So you're taking the template of a movie and the template of a hero's journey, and you're delivering it in a learning system where the audience themselves, the speaker is not the hero. I am potentially the hero. I can go through this process, my ordinary world, whether it's homelessness or I'm broke or divorced or whatever, and go through this process. There's a call to adventure that you even talked about your own experience around changing your patterns, doing things that are uncomfortable, tests, enemies, and there's always a Mr. Miyagi, or if not, find one.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest keys. So whereas Nietzsche gave us the actual, we'll call it the movie, or, what I call a template for, I wish I had junior high for human life, right? He says in Ubermensch, he says that man is a rope fastened between animal and Superman. Now, this is really funny, right? When you get people saying, what up, dog, men are pigs, sheep, jackass, the movie. That's literally animal. And because humans can become all those things. But the journey is to somehow birth your Superman. You're above who you were born.
So when Nietzsche said that, he was talking about the character Superman.
That's what he called it, in fact.
But that wasn't like the superhero.
There was no such thing. It was just, he was the first one to use.
He's using the actual word super.
He created the term that then was used by the comic book writers.
I got it.
So he writes this in 1875 to 1881 or so. And so he says, man is a rope fastened between these 2 points. And so in a hero school, I draw this for them, and then I draw it, and it's a rope over an abyss. We saw the movie The Abyss. I draw the Grand Canyon. But basically, I'm giving someone a visual template of the philosophical roadmap for how humans are supposed to be, that we aren't going to become, I've had horses and I watched one of our mares have a foal, and this horse is running at 5 hours old. Right. And I'm like 13, 14 months because I was a fat baby. But if we still hadn't learned from someone how to walk upright, we wouldn't have. Right. That was proven by the, what was that research from about 1926, the ghost girls or ghost children, Amala and Kamala from India. So these British missionaries had heard the stories of two humanoid characters running with the wolves. And it turns out as little babies, they were just adopted by the mothering wolves and raised into their teens. So they, brought them back to captivity, but they could never, one learned to walk upright after a year and a half, but they couldn't break her from pouncing on small rodents and eating them. So we look at the human being is we need a map for everything, right? And look at Judaism and look at the process. There's this understanding at age 13 that's when you're supposed to go off and learn now from the teachers and doctors. And that's what we see in Harry Potter. And that's what we see with Jesus ditching his parents to go learn from the doctors of the law. And we start to see that these weren't options. And we created an education system in America. And I know people might badmouth it because then, they say, well, this is for the industrial time. It's different now. No, it was still the template that we were supposed to go off to Hogwarts and now learn from Dumbledore and McGonagall and Snape, even the one that you hate. Right. And so this was the template, and that has been lost in American culture unless they sent you to private school. Right. So when I came up with Hero School, I'm just looking at a character who has to change. That's the key fundamental part that I wrote into our big history of heroes and hero movies. And then I created the math formula for the change. So Joseph Campbell came up with in 1949, of course, 1926 to 49, you don't write that kind of a book. I can't even read the book. It's so deep. But in 49, he says it's departure, fulfillment, return. Right. Then Chris Vogler, through Stephen Pressfield is a disciple now, Vogler, he starts taking all the key points of this type of written piece.
Say those three again. Departure,
fulfillment, return. It's Luke Skywalker departing his family, Tatooine, all that he's used to. Fulfillment is where he recognizes there's a force and it connects with him. And then he learns the ways of the Force, where he's fulfilled with Obi-Wan Kenobi, the master of the Force, and then he return of the Jedi, right? It's Moses. He leaves Egypt not when he was supposed to, right? Because he was the prince of Egypt. If he'd waited one more day, he could have freed everybody. He would have been Pharaoh. But instead, you got to deal with all the emotional crises like a Happy Gilmore, and you end up just taking small jobs. He goes into the wilderness, and now he gets another chance. So now you get the enlightenment with the 10 Commandments. Or like I love Mel Brooks' version, I give you these 15, 10 commandments. Brilliant. This part 2. But then he returns. And of course, when you read that Old Testament, it says, I will make you a god to Pharaoh. So you return as another man. And so departure, fulfillment, return. So this is the overarching philosophical journey with which those steps now for writing a story. It fits within. What I did, I'm focusing on the character changing. How does the character change? Because you put a lot of people in the story. Yeah, they refuse the call. And they never get past step 3. So I got to get them to say yes to the call. So now they can get to the next thing. And so what I'm doing is I'm literally, especially with the homeless, all right. So you call, this is a fascinating thing between the entrepreneur world and the nonprofit world, as I learned it naively. I thought when I had a hot water heater leak, I'm calling the plumber that's going to get everything cleaned up and a new hot water heater, take care of the water mess, and get my family back happy in the shortest amount of time. And that's what I created Hero School to provide. Instead, nobody in the nonprofit world wants you to be the best. And I thought that's what you wanted. And so I can't even imagine things that should take 2 hours. I can't imagine that people have taken 10, 12 years and they're still fine with it. So I come from a different standpoint, and that's where, this movie thing here is there's a ticking clock. Okay. So back to, this template. If I have, and the metaphor of the hot water heater, I literally have a bunch of older, but still functional hot water heaters that don't have their pilot lights lit. So the first session of a hero school is relighting that pilot light. And it's relighting their humanity because they've been living like animals. They've been treated all the way people help them is reinforcing them like an animal. Right? Oh, here, come here. Here's this and so forth. Never activating the parts that make them human. Right? J.K. Rowling says the difference between humans and animals is imagination. Napoleon Hill, right? Think and Grow Rich. He says that, the difference between humans and animals, every animal seems to know when its mating season is. Not humans think it's open season. But we discovered, and mostly because of the movies, that humans are the only species that become what they learn. We change into what we learn, and that's why the fundamental theme of every single movie isn't the 12 steps. It's the character must change. You can't stay Peter Parker and save Aunt May or the city or defeat the villain. You can't stay Happy Gilmore, loser hockey player, and get Grandma's house back from the IRS or, win the cup that also frees the homeless guy, get, free Subway for life if you're into that old story. So you have to change. So the character must change. It's like Shakespeare, Hamlet, madness and great ones must not unwatched go. And we have to return to this must if we're going to solve a problem, especially a human problem. So we're designed for this, and all the old mythology teaches it. And then somewhere we've slowed and dumbed it down. And so I wonder, I wonder why. And to me, if I'm not good at something and it doesn't work, right? Truth is what works. I got to find the person that's better. Mm-hmm. And somewhere we've just said, well, let's try something else. Us, the same people, right? I don't want to put someone through plumbing school. I want my hot water heater fixed by the best person to do it.
I'm getting the sense that you going out and doing your work, you're running up against others who are maybe doing this work that is frustrating to you.
We have, at last count, I think we're at 1,255 Hero School modules after dealing with the homeless in 1995. So we've had to create a Hero School antidote to all of the new issues that have become burdening these human beings, largely because of well-intended people doing something without considering that they're human. I think they're human, but they come from compassion or sympathy, no doubt. I just really wish that the people that wanted to provide shelter were the best at providing shelter. And then they brought the people in that could do transformation the best, and let the people that do resumes the best or connect them to plumbing, the plumbing union, and they're probably the best at that. Let's get everyone into the best part. Don't try to keep doing everything yourself because there was a grant available for it.
So Shelley Berkeley ran for mayor of Las Vegas, and she won.
Yes.
And there were 3 initiatives that she was campaigning around. One of them was addressing the homeless issue.
Yes.
So you've been addressing the homeless issue for 3 decades, almost.
Can't believe it. November.
So, what are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? I mean, you're starting to talk about that.
Yeah. So I think in my first era, right, I was just trying to help the city with something, and I didn't think it was hard. And it's like the answer is the pushback you get. First off, the schools didn't want anything to do with heroism, right? With these movies, it's all fiction, and I'm thinking, no, now it's a little different, isn't it? The other was you're so arrogant. And I'm thinking, well, no, arrogant. If you looked up any definitions, there's a great verse by the Apostle Paul, in his book to the Church of Rome. And he lets them all talk about, well, we can't solve it because of this. And can you believe the people are doing this? And then chapter 2, verse 1 begins with, but because you see all this stuff, you're actually guilty of it. It says, thou art inexcusable, O man, whosoever thou art that judgest, for wherein thou judgest another, thou condemnest thyself, for he that judgest does the same things. And I remember I loved the podcast with Guy Martin, and looking at how much he understands a lot of it, cares about these principles. And he talks about, it's why I never judge. And it's fascinating. If you look at the depth of these lessons, instead of just coming back with, you're arrogant. Yeah, but the definition of arrogance is when you talk about something you can't do. So the only people who are arrogant are the people who call other people arrogant. By definition, you're guilty of what you judge. Right? You're confident if you're good at it, right? Let me just go do that for you. Who do you think you are? Well, how much time have you got? Is it a 4-hour podcast? No. Right? We're just trying to put the best person on the job and not do what we can't do well. Maybe practice our craft until we can.
Yeah.
But there's this thing about judgment.
You're the transformation guy, so to speak?
Well, accidentally. I didn't ask for this. It certainly wasn't on my game plan. Tiger, do you have any kids? No, I thought I was going to do that after I took this 3 years to help these homeless get out of my park. So, but then, end up in a school and it starts the next hero's journey. And then the obstacles to that. And you start to, okay, well, let's help all the organizations that got funding after Desert Storm and see if we can help them. And it seems like they really wanted to grow an industry instead of solve a problem. Do you remember watching those Jerry Lewis telethons growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Something used to bug me that after maybe 5 years of watching these and all the millions they'd raised, I mean, we're happy for it. I was a kid, but somehow we were donating. I still wondered if you haven't solved it yet. And I just wish some people just had put themselves on the must list where they just decided.
Can it be solved? Can homelessness be solved, so to speak?
Well,
or is it, you said earlier, the rate of homeless is exceeding the rate of, I don't know, you said it so much more eloquently than I did.
Yeah. So if the rate of homelessness that we're producing homelessness, and I say we're producing, right? That's Albert Einstein, right? The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. So yeah, if we have systems in place that create, in order to become, I take out the trash, but I don't work for public services and I'm not a garbage man, right? So there's something about doing things, I might blame here and there, but not to turn pro at it. And we're talking about the condition of someone who, you're looking at someone that you couldn't not just hire in your business, they certainly would never be able to run your business until they undergo this change. I can't hire someone with habit 2 if they're constantly in my interview with them. I can't have them blaming the last person they worked for. There's the reason why they have trouble. I think I'm next. Right? So these are not just the homeless, right? These are issues that we've allowed to happen, right? As we're seeing now with the new administration in Washington, right? And we mentioned the mayor, and this is something she wants to deal with. If you want to solve it, it has to be solved in every one of the areas. We have to solve it in public school, which means we're really inoculating them. Or if you turn them into entrepreneurs, you're inoculated. If you teach them to add value first, they're not going to beg and they're not going to steal. They're going to be more excited starting a business, not getting 50 of their friends, habit 3, and going and raiding a Target because they think they deserve it. Right? Habits 1 and 3 is the stuff we're seeing in California, And so if you teach the values, the people become those values. Problem is we've got it's only used one time in the entire Bible, the word hireling. There's John chapter 10 talking about there's the true shepherd and then there's the hireling. And it seems like we just want to hire people who've had a hard time in positions that to me are life critical. And are not, and let's say we're hiring a teacher, but you can't impart what you're not. These are true human principles, right? You can't impart engineering to another human so that they become an engineer unless you first mastered it. And I think we need to go back and look at some of these real philosophical parts of what makes a human and move from the credential. I have my degree. I can now go practice engineering. Yeah, it's true. But we can't take a homeless person and teach them plumbing and then turn them loose in someone's home if their character hasn't changed, right? Because their family's there. because maybe they get angry at the same reaction they had with their last girlfriend. And what do? They leave the door open or they kick the dog, right? So character has to change. And so the only people that can help that happen are people who have mastered these functions of character.
So you talked about
that was a dark joke.
That was good. I don't think it was dark. I'll tell you what was coming to my mind as you were talking. I was on a board, industry board, great people, capable people. The dynamics, it's a board. It's decision by consensus or majority. I worked with somebody else, so it's two of us on the board. We had a vision to create a new initiative. We didn't need consensus or majority. We didn't need other people's input. This is arrogant, by the way, right? It's not. It was just factually me and the other person, my co-founder of this initiative. We got it. We have a vision. We're both aligned on the vision. Yeah. We're going to go do the work. We're going to go do the research. We're going to go iterate. We're going to go do the work. We got it. We just need you not to get in our way. That's it.
Yeah.
And you will have this new initiative that we all agree in principle that we want.
Right.
The dynamics of a board, there's, well, what about, and I need to understand, and there's all this stuff. It's not that there's bad people on that board that aren't capable. It's just that's the dynamic.
Yeah.
Frustrating as hell for me because I see the path.
Yeah.
We don't need to do this. Trust me in my ability and I will deliver it. It'll just show up. But when you're on a board, you do have a duty. So you have to get involved in some form. So as you were talking, I sort of flashed back to that moment. All the resistance we were getting, it's like, why are we getting resistance on this?
Yeah.
We're going to do this. We beta tested it, the initiative, and then we're going to launch. We got it.
Right.
We got it. So we're on year 3 of this initiative now, by the way. But I'm listening to you and I was flashing back to that. It's like, why are you just get out of the way? It's okay to get out of the way also.
So if I was to go, I remember going to schools and the people said, well, humans are rational beings. I was like, well, I used to have 50 volunteers from UNLV. And when there was a big deal they saw a video on child soldiers in Uganda, some sort of crazy emotion took them over and they forgot all about their schoolwork or even keeping their commitments to me. So they're clearly emotional beings.
Yeah.
Where do emotions come from? And when Metro's pulling apart 2 people fighting over Ford versus Chevy at a BT's pub, and we find out we're believing beings because one who believes that Ford is better probably learned it when they were 6 years old from their dad. And to get in a fight with somebody else who was their friend during the day, fellow employee, because of Chevy, right? You didn't go rationally to figure out, well, I remember the Pinto and I remember, you start to recognize that, we're believing beings and we have to start acknowledging that many of the beliefs that were just implanted in us early don't hold water. So part of what Hero School does is provide tools to understand that. Well, I brought this thing up because one day years ago, because I had the same experience you had, trying to help the city with a fathering initiative. And we were done. We knew exactly what we were doing.
What's a fathering initiative?
Well, how do you get fathers involved in their kids' lives, even if they're no longer married to the?
Why would the city be involved with that?
Well, it wasn't. It was the city because they're wondering if they're going to give block grants to this group. I didn't care. That's why we self-fund. That's why Hero School is like the private school of this thing. Yeah, you're funding public school, but look, we're going to do what works.
Yeah.
And that's why, if the charity goes on, it's because, thank God, good people that are, get behind it. Because we can't take that government obstacle or worse, telling us to do something that they already have a proven track record of mucking up or growing as an industry. So we discuss these things in a way that, how do you get to the finish line? Right. Without adding again, all of these, these little pieces, in between. So yeah, you were saying this. I was in one of my stores and I think I was always, I have a gift for teaching, which makes me horrible at I always want to teach something. And some people just want, it's like that, the great joke about women, right? I just want you to hear me out and empathize. And I just say, well, this is what you should do, right? So I just always go right into this natural teaching. And I discover that looking back, because even in my stores, I had whiteboards in my stores to teach the physics of signal wave inside of an amplifier. And, but I had a group one time at one of my stores and, after the session, a couple of the younger people, whether they came from churches or from schools or whatever, they'd hang out, 30 of them, and a few would hang around, just happy to be there. We're still discussing a topic. I don't even remember what the topic was many years ago, before my work with the homeless. And I walked into my office, and remember answering machines when they had a tape and they were flashing. And so there was flashing.
I'm old enough for that.
And
I know that.
You knew who it was, and I knew who it was before I even pushed the button. And there was a woman I had hired from a church. I had helped this church out with sound equipment. Remember, I wasn't raised religious, but I study, learn stuff, respect everyone. And this woman needed a job, so I gave her a part-time job. 3 days later, she's a no-show. 2 days after that, I get a call from her at the hospital saying, "Why haven't you come to visit me?" I says, "What's going on?" She says, "Well, I'm in here because it was too much stress." And Pressfield has a whole list of things in Turning Pro. And he has a whole lot of great names for these types of things. But I was just, look, I can't leave. I'm out of 20 hours a week at my business at this point, just trying to keep it alive. But anyway, she got angry with me from not going to see her in the hospital because 4 hours total was too much stress for her. In the sound system business. And so the next day she calls with 3 pastors by her bed who all gave me the what for and how horrible I was for not coming to see this woman in the hospital. That night, it was her that left me a message, and I forgot that I had 2 people, 2 young, influential people that were influenced by me, watching at the door, and I pressed the button. And she went through what seemed like an eternity, berating me. "You're so horrible. I don't care who you think you are," or whatever, and stuff like that. But, you say you do this and try to help people, but then you're not even here. I'm here suffering in the hospital or whatever, so forth. And then she finishes and she says this one line: "Everyone can't be wrong and you right." And it was like a knife in my heart. And I said, "Oh no," how you get all white and the blood drains out. And then I turned, and I realized these 2 people were still standing in the doorway, and they've heard this whole thing, and they think now they've been listening to the Antichrist. So I didn't know what to do, and just I just looked at them dumbfounded, and I said, "Well, where is that written? Where is it written that everyone can't be wrong, right? And only one person right?" And no sooner had I said those words, just asking the universe this, said, "Well, everyone was wrong about the flood and only Noah was right. Everyone was wrong about the natural state of an object. Only Isaac Newton was right for 1,850 years. Everyone was wrong about time being a constant, except for Albert Einstein, which is now only proven a few years ago in Colorado. But they were all wrong for 93 years. And you start to recognize there's just ever only one person right. I remember watching a Democratic National Convention, and Hillary Clinton is saying, anyone who says they're the only one who can do this, red flag should go. And she was so animated. She believed it. She was that person. She believed that there couldn't be one person right. And yet all of history, mythology, religion, every breakthrough in science, one person. All the movies are the story of one person. All the history book stories, one person right. And then the group comes together, as you should have led that board, to deliver the right, not to consensus on the average of the right with the wrong. And so we've lost some of these truths that one person, right answer. Truth is what works. How do you know if it's right? You try it. If it didn't work, not the right answer. Mm-hmm. And then we come together in teams to deliver this antidote or this right, or to polish it for a different group. And I think we've lost a lot of these fundamentals of truth, and we've settled for facts. Facts comes from a 15th century Latin word, means man-made or fabricated. And I hear politicians say, well, those are the facts. Yeah, that means they're man-made or fabricated.
Well, that's ironic.
Like a fax machine. It's not the original. Yeah, so I learned a lot that day. So my book, The Only One Right, you have stories like Ignaz Semmelweis, right? He's the guy, the Hungarian doctor who's working in a German hospital. And he's wondering why, and they were trying to get, come to our hospital to have your babies delivered. We won't even charge you, because at that time it was mostly midwives. Well, only 2% of, or maybe 4% at the time, of moms would die giving birth with midwives. 22% were dying in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, look, I've created a substance that you can wash your hands, and if you do this thing, the babies, they won't die. And instead of doing what he said, they kick him out of the hospital because the answer was something that the humans were doing wrong.
So this is actually, I know this. This is actually a real story.
It's not
this is why doctors wash their hands now.
It's
medical professionals now wash their hands, whereas doctors were so arrogant back then. They didn't think this person knew better because they were the ones that were educated and doctors. And for years it went on where they would not adopt the practice of washing hands.
So are we saying we can't free someone from homelessness or another issue because we won't do principle 2 and just take the blame and say, you know what, I must have been doing it wrong, and get moving on? That we're so defending the failure, we just say, well, we need more money in order to make this work. In order to educate your kids, now we're going to need more money. And so what do they do? They go to Carson City and beg for more money. All the while,
so if you were Shelley's advisor,
yes,
like what steps would you run her through?
Well, the first thing was to find out what's the scope of what Shelley wants to do. We can neutralize homelessness in the valley, but somewhere at the state level, or at least the county level, we need to at least keep kids from becoming homeless by inadvertently, whether home or in the school, learning the 4 habits that create that person so that tomorrow we're not generating more adults. In the 90s, when I started, all the homeless came from somewhere else. Las Vegas did not.
I was going to ask, so you focus on kids. Kids, I imagine based on that, you've concluded that kids becoming homeless is a percentage of the homeless population.
Yeah.
I imagine there's a percentage that are still coming here from somewhere else. I imagine there is a percentage that are mentally ill.
Well, all of them are, but after the treatment, after first 2-hour Breakthrough Academy session, only 19 out of, maybe only 1 out of the 20 need further services. It's really something when a human activates their will, how much they can control themselves instead of get away with it. What is it? Pressfield calls it the payoff of incapacity. It's still a mental illness to try to go get yourself hit by a car jaywalking again, so you don't have to be responsible to show up to do the one thing you need to do to get over this. And very often they get into that rut of just looking for the next thing of avoidance. And so it's all mental illness. But if you put them through treatment where they want to be free, and now
I imagine there's a spectrum though, to where someone is so mentally ill that 2 hours is not enough, and also it's just treatment without medication is not enough.
It's so rare on my end. It's so rare after, because we take them in just as they are. Right? We're not pre-vetting them. The Hero School is the vetting instrument. And
what about prisons?
Yeah. Well, for same 4 habits, aren't they? Except it's
no. Do you have Hero Schools inside of prisons?
Well, we did all those times ago, but then again, when the government decides to partner to create their own programs, and so you say, what would you tell Shelley not to do? Don't make up your own ideas.
Just find what works.
Let's start with what works, and then use the environments we have.
Start flowing into
reducing the damage, and more than that, it's freeing human beings to live the lives they're meant for.
So you've got on your website programs, Hero School programs. There's the University Suit Up Experience, Heroes for Business, Heroes for Schools, Hero School Community Initiatives, and Breakthrough Academy.
Yeah, so
those all different.
Breakthrough Academies are within Hero School Community Initiatives. So they have the five different initiatives for the prevention and reversal of homelessness, at the nonprofit level. So it's the street interventions and so forth. Of course, I do a lot of the street interventions, and of course we're all for free at the charity. I do it just to keep proving that the stuff that I work out still works. And we want to make sure it works. I don't want to do anything wrong, so it's a great nonstop experimental field. And we're freeing people really fast. In fact, let me add that, because during interventions, when you recognize you have less time, or that there are like more charities just jumping in to help, we've now been able to take habit 1 and neutralize that during the intervention. Before, we only could figure out how to do it while they were in the large group, neutralizing all four at the same time. But now we can be successful. I'm going to say successful with 49 out of 50, neutralizing habit one in the field by showing them it's in their best interest. And that's while they're living outdoors. So if another organization's having success, or place God, let the county and let Metro have success getting them indoors and doing the right thing, hopefully it's obviously because we hit a lot of people during the interventions.
What's University Suit Up?
So Suit Up is, the charity has like a Dress for Success for men and has for 20 some years. But what we discovered through interviews with UNLV in about 2015 was the students there were not knowing why they were there anymore. Right. So they're students that they don't have the courage or the confidence to go do things. There's a public speaking confidence. There's maybe they've been trained. It became what they learned from kindergarten. Don't talk to strangers. So the school was holding a job fair with all these alums and all their businesses, and the students would sit 5-6 people away, 8 feet away, never engaging with adults who were just 5 years older than them. So we diagnosed that preliminary as if they were scared to death of those people because humans become what they want. Don't talk to strangers. They talk to their friends. It's not public speaking. They're talking to strangers. That's what they're afraid of. So we created a hero school that neutralized not just the 4 habits, but also neutralized that fear by digging it up at source in real time. And then we also use an abridged version of the 7 steps to the job you want. Same one I can teach in the afternoon session with even homeless people. But we did that at a bridge and then had a series of experts on the panel. And in 24 hours, 250 students get hired instead of 0 engage at the job fair. Oh, and because we're enticing them to show up by providing a free suit. Professional suit. So that's what.
And you get those donated, I imagine?
Yeah. So we get most of that clothing is donated. And then we partner with like Dress for Success for the women's wear. Of course, the best part of Dress for Success isn't just the clothes. It's that they have just an extraordinary network of professional women, who care and who really are a hand up for the women in the community.
What's Heroes for Business?
Here's for business when I come in and do a business too. Let's say the people aren't selling, they don't have confidence in themselves, or again, they have the same kind of public speaking issues. How do you neutralize public speaking issues?
So this is bringing you into the business to do a session or a talk or a presentation.
Primarily me. Sometimes we've done it with a panel of 4 different people. Depends on the time or the session. But if it's just a quick breakthrough, it's just like bringing Tony Robbins in.
And then Heroes for Schools, you've talked
about shorter.
That's you. Shorter than Tony Robbins.
And his hand size and his shoe size. Giant. And of course, he's super smart. I watched him neutralize Tourette's in like 7 minutes with somebody. So, but again, this is what we're looking for. These are faster ways to do things. I thought in the beginning I was just going to share them with the world and take this on, not realizing that they only use the tip of the iceberg, for a short time. So maybe I'm sorry.
No, I was saying Heroes for School we've talked about.
Yes.
That's you going into schools. And
schools. So that's twofold. Of course, you're re-equipping teachers with faster ways to get the kids to want to learn from them. And of course, you're preparing first the kids to do exactly that. And it changes by grade level. Mostly now it's all going to be middle school, because, high schools, they've lost a lot of that control until the last 3 months of high school, where the kids say, oh crap, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And every one of them knew what they were going to do when they were in 2nd grade. But somehow
that's interesting.
They had a rough patch. Yeah.
Let's go into rapid fire takeaways. What's number 1 on your must read book list?
For you, I ordered you one. It's Osborne. She does the Art of the Life of Living with Joseph Campbell. So the reflections on the life. And it's a tremendous book that her observations from hearing Joseph Campbell at the Esalen Institute, but they're just brilliant little metaphorical stories in there. The one for business and sales that I think everyone needs to learn is from Oren Klaff, called Flip the Script. So he did a book not too long ago, but he really lays out great principles in that people don't think of because they're like trained in a certain way. I want more people to think, is this the way, right? It's like, how do I approach this homeless person? Right? So he's really good at getting you to, this might be the best way to, to make that work. I think that you get great extant research from books like Daniel Coyle's The Talent Code, because these people are observers. They've not done anything first person, as most books are, whether it's Start With Why or whatever. They're observers, but they highlight ones. The only one, right, in a certain time that did research in 1973, from the Funk and Wagnalls of which was the longest or shortest biography, you find out, oh my God, they were orphans, or they were the eldest of the kids, and now why? And so there's some great things that produce curiosity and give us a better human sense, reading books like his book, The Talent Code.
Yeah. Talent Code.
Yeah, The Talent Code.
What's your best tip for public speaking?
Is to recognize that when you're on stage or you have the mic, this is your time. It's about you. So many people that I coach on public speaking, they get there and they start to be concerned that, oh my God, I don't have the degree that this person has, or, they have all this experience. They're very, very often triggered by the early conversation. They go get up there and they forget who they are. Years ago, I was doing a car stereo for a very wealthy, important person. It was one of only 3 Ferraris, and they only wanted me to work on it, and I wasn't the best installer in my business. And they even brought their chief of security to sit with it. And I remember sitting there just staring at the door to even touch this car. And then this voice hits me and says, did they bring it to you for a reason? Yeah. Why? Well, because I can produce the best sound or whatever. It says, well, then you're it, aren't you? And it just hit me that you just have to remember that if they brought it to you, you're it, be it. So I told them, you just got to give me a cup of coffee. I went too far there.
All right. So if I'm driving to work, I see the homeless person with a sign. Do I give them money or not?
It's not a yes or no question. First off, you're going to do what you want to do anyway. People do, but they're going to do anyway. I learned that from Jeff, one of our interventionists, Jeff Powell. I'm busy there on to teach people, well, this is the right approach at this time. And he says, you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. But just understand, if their 4 habits are begging, blaming, learning horizontally, talking back down the story, whatever you do, don't listen to a story, right? And don't wait until they ask for something. Right. So I think you do with, what were you going to do anyway? Why were you going to want to do it? It's easier when there's a hero school because you can direct them to the hero school. What you don't want to do is that joke I was telling you about the comedian at the beginning of the thing. Don't roll down the window when he says, homeless, please help. Don't roll down the window and say, it's unhoused, and roll it up and drive off. Don't correct them. I will tell you what to do when you're in a safe environment. Like you're on your way in to buy groceries. You're on a mission. And the most important thing someone can do that has a job, a profession, and a purpose is to exude that in front of the homeless. Don't go down to the homeless's level. You're the only role model they need. So when you're walking into a grocery store and a homeless person's hanging out and they ask you for something, they beg, start with no. Now I say that you can start with no. Don't do that on the street. Do it when you're going into a safe place like a grocery store. And you can start with no. And then you will know by the immediate reaction of that homeless person whether you can help them or not. Because you'll get one of 2 responses. You'll either get, okay, thanks, man. Or you will get, well, you MF, and they'll start turning on you. They turn on you, you just dodged a bullet. And security's there to take them to a more secure place until they can realize their own behavior. But if they say, okay, thanks, man, you can do, there's a parable in the New Testament Jesus gave to his disciples. He said there was a dad, and he asked his 2 sons, who's going to get up with me and help me work in the field? And one son said, yeah, Dad, I'm going to do it. The other one says, no, thanks, not my idea of a Saturday. So the next day, the one that said yes didn't show, and the one that said no changed his mind. So even the Christian world has a principle or a fundamental truth that you can say no and still change your mind. And I think the safest way is to start with no and then change your mind. And here's what we do then. You'd say, okay, wait here for 15 minutes. I got to go do my stuff. And if you're still here, I'll give you this. Now what you've done is they're here. It's just they're after 15 minutes, they've earned whatever you give them. You give them $5, it's $20 an hour. And they've shown that by doing this and just reinforce the fact that they've done something the same way you've earned yours. And now hopefully their behavior will change in the future.
So in your 29 years, is there a favorite story of a hero that you've affected or your material has affected?
There's a lot. We've had
it's like asking who your favorite kid is.
Yeah, right? We've had, well, I can tell you that. No, we've had a little over 60,000 successes, but keep in mind, my role is I can never listen to their story. But I have recently, during a Breakthrough Academy, I know these were supposed to be quick, but during a Breakthrough Academy, we go, well, it's really Nietzsche, animal to Superman. The first 2 hours is get them back to human. Okay. Then we get them connected to the real world, and then we're down to the individual. And so this might be the next week. So we're growing the prefrontal cortex, and we're getting them back from grouping with other homeless people, habit 3, getting them back to their individual. Now it's just obstacle removal. What's the obstacle? So we have a legal Q&A so they can ask a good question of a lawyer in order to find out how to deal with eviction, how to deal with this, right? So now they're just obstacle removal because now they're willing to do it themselves. They're not just going to somebody, can I have your stuff? Can you do this for me? The last one we did, which was February 22nd, legal Q&A would have been the 25th. The expert, into his session, told everyone, and not only is he this attorney and he does this and has a small business and, and his wife and his kids and whatever, he then reveals that 15 years ago, he was one of my homeless students at Catholic Charities.
Did you know that?
I knew it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I knew it.
I can imagine if you're sitting there and he's answering the question and then he tells a story.
Yeah.
And you didn't know. I'd be like,
yeah. Well, a lot of people have come up or called from different places. The guy that, runs a business in California, but I almost get him like after 10 years.
So he's now an attorney.
Yeah, he's now an attorney and a business owner.
Was homeless.
Not just homeless, drug addict, in and out of jail, just, horrible. All the stuff I didn't ask him before because he's just a student in my class.
Yeah.
And I inoculate, we're trying to free him from the condition. So this many years later, by the way, I did bump into him, in 2018 when I was doing a suit up at UNLV. So I knew he was a UNLV student at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so, I get so he was in that class. So but now to hear the rest of his story of what he filled in, who was additional experts. And he actually did just do a little
full circle. I'm sure there's many, but like that is a specific full circle moment we can talk about the first day at the park.
Yeah.
Where you say to yourself, not only would I not hire any of these people, there's no way that they could run my company. And so you go on your own hero's journey. And now you have a student that you wouldn't have hired, wouldn't have been able to run your company that goes through this and is now running his own company.
And an attorney.
And an attorney running his own company and giving back.
And giving back. And that's the thing I see with most of them. I was at an apartment complex doing nutrition interventions, which is prevention, homelessness prevention. And 6 of the people at one apartment complex were graduates of Hero School years ago. And I didn't know it, but the guy running it, you then start to hear the story is he takes it as his heroic duty to help his people. And I see that was something I was not able to impart in my business. And I regret that I hadn't learned that by then. But I'm grateful that at least the last, 20 some years of my life, they take heroism as part of who they're going to be.
Is there a quote you most quote?
Recently, it's been truth is what works. I've always wanted to say, I'm Batman. But the reason why I get people in my prison reentry hero schools to do that one, because I want to remind them that they have 2 selves, that they have a Bruce Wayne self and a Batman self. And that we split at age 13, right? We know that in Judaism, we know it in Christianity, the Bible, that you have 2 selves, and now both of them need experts, your Bruce Wayne self and your Batman self. And you can't neglect learning the math, the English, all the stuff you're supposed to do to be a good citizen, just so you can play in a garage band on Friday night, right? Your super self. So you need to be learning both at the same time. And so I'm Batman goes a lot deeper than just I'm Batman.
That's pretty good. Ending question. When you think about Las Vegas over the next 20 years, what are you most hopeful about?
When Max Planck delivered his Nobel Prize winning speech, his speech after winning a Nobel Prize many years ago, he was asked, so how are you going to teach the people who are so steeped in classical mechanics? How are you going to teach them that quantum mechanics is the real world, that there's so much more than what they know and what they have PhDs in? And he says, you don't change their minds. And they say, well, what do you mean? He says, no, they all have to die. But the next generation's going to bring them forward. I'm very...
Is that what he said?
Yeah. Yeah. He says, but a new generation's going to come up and they're going to have those values. We saw it actually happen with Japan, right? We have Japanese culture. We have Japanese principles. And then they had an Americanized young generation that led the world in suicide because they didn't know who to be. Nietzsche says the man of late cultures and broken lights will on average be a rather weak man, that his fundamental desire is the world he is should come to an end. So happiness appears to him according to sedative. So when we see the increase in sedatives, alcohol, too much TV, too much internet, you find that somebody doesn't know who they are and how to put those pieces together. But then we see the third generation and they've worked out those pieces on who to be. And they become international principles from the old world and the acumen of what the new world needs. And that's where I'm really hopeful. I'm seeing a resurgence in the need for the core principles and philosophies that make us the best humans and their Batman selves of really knowing how to be leading edge in those things. It's what is it Stephen Covey said, you have to be good, but you got to be good for something, right? There's got to be a purpose behind the good, right? And so I'm seeing that in the future.
Very cool. How can people find you and connect with the work that you do?
Let's see. Heroeschool.us is the website. The main phone number, 702-795-7000 has been the portal number for all those years. They can shine a bat signal. I might not get there because I'm busy. No, I
wouldn't take you to be Batman over like Superman or someone else, but sounds like Batman resonates most of you.
Well, people will call me Superman because they equate it to the movies, and of course I let them know that I'm Superman's dad, right? Look, the movies aren't, and the stories aren't about the hero. The stories are about the mentors that imparted the model to help someone go from insignificant into the character they needed to be to solve the real deal. So it's the teachers, it's the coaches, it's the bosses. That's what Hero School is about, and so we just do it because obviously it's, you create more of these better mentors, you create far better people downstream. The Batman thing, though, is when you think that they negotiated making that comic strip, they negotiated on, well, let's make him a detective, and very often we have quirky detectives and they have all these flaws, but they're able to get to the one thing that's needed. It's a Sherlock Holmes story. He's got all these issues, but he's still the one that could figure out what no one else can, and
but they made him a billionaire.
They made him a billionaire, and Sherlock even, they had to fund him. The funding has to come from somewhere. So I will rely on like-minded people who are really good at doing that part so I can be good at transformation. The leadership pyramid, right? If you have somebody who runs a company, right? The entrepreneur that founded the company is the transformer. But today, most of them are organizational leaders. You have to have that adjective. And then they're financial leaders. And then, of course, there's these technological scale leaders. But I think everyone who, if you can put all four together, you can create a massive social change, right? Somebody who's good at taking $1 in and turning it into 10. Somebody who's good at managing people like a Guy Martin, right? He's incredible at people. I've always just been the transformer, and many times I have to remain a fictional character. A lot of people who succeeded in those heists, they have no idea who I am because I had to be transparent to their freedom. Right. I'm not trying to take credit for who they become. It's all about who they become. So, and then of course the technological leader, we see technology moving so fast. I don't know who's keeping up with that. But I'm grateful for everyone doing their part.
Very cool. And you're certainly doing your part. Frank Martin, as we talked about earlier, he's someone who I respect a lot, admire a lot. And what he said about you is, he didn't say in his words, you're the real deal, but that was what he was communicating. You know, the real deal, and that you've been doing this as long as someone like you that's been doing this as long as you've been doing this. And he knows that when you call, there's an actual need, and you're just not calling because your job is to call and to keep raising money and whatnot. So
Yeah.
that means a lot from someone like him. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for going along. I met Frank at a school, volunteering 20 years ago at a school to talk to kids. And that's Frank.
Frank was talking to the kids.
We were all there as a part of the volunteer program.
You were talking to the kids and he was talking to
We
the
all
kids.
got to go to different classrooms, and there he was invested in the next generation. And you see how Guy turned out.
Yeah.
You know, those are incredible people.
Yes, they are. And so are you. Thank you for all the work that you're doing and continue to do. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you about your takeaways from this episode. Make sure to leave us a comment or leave us a review. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear future episodes as they come out. My name is Hayim. Tune in next time.